Hey guys, this is a 1971 Chevy Nova Four Door. Now, this hunk of buyer's remorse sat at a body shop for almost 30 years before my dumbass decided to bring it home and try to make it cool. It's rusty, it's crusty, it's really nasty, and I'm gonna call it Project Tetanus Shot. I was gonna call it something else, but I'm probably gonna need a tetanus shot after working on this giant pile of shit. The back end of it's pretty rusty. It's got a bunch of trash in it. We're gonna clean this thing up, make it run, make it drive, and have some fun with it. When I first started working on it, the engine was locked up. I got it broken loose, but it wouldn't crank because it didn't have compression. So we swapped heads, intake, and carburetor, distributor in there, got some compression, got this thing running in the last video. Now we're gonna make it run and drive. So this thing is pretty nasty. First thing we're gonna do is get it cleaned up a little bit. It's crusty and nasty top to bottom. So I'm gonna get this thing cleaned up good enough to where I can sit in it, work on it without worrying about, something crawling on me. And then we're gonna worry about getting the rear end mounted good, then the brakes, then the wiring, and see if it'll move. So the first thing we're gonna do is get this thing cleaned up a little bit. I like to separate all the stuff that might work, I might need it, from the stuff that's just pure trash, going straight in the can. So there's some parts in here, might be beneficial in a future build. I'll stick all that on the roof. Alright, so we got it kind of clean. Not real clean, kind of clean. Clean enough where I don't feel like I need a bath when I get out of it. I haven't sat in it yet, but if I get in it and then I get out, the back is fairly clean. The floorboards are pretty rusty, but they're still there, and the trunk is completely shot, but it's okay. The trunk will be, I don't care, it's a four-door. It's going to the scrap pile eventually someday. But I got most of the dirt and grime. Okay, I got none of the dirt and grime out of it. I got most of the leaves, old pecans, and pine straw, and the big clumps of dirt and dead animal carcasses. All of that out. Now we're gonna get the rear end mounted on this thing, and then we'll work on the brakes. All right, so the rear end is not really even mounted in there, barely. I've just got some bolts in the spring perch. I've got, this leaf spring's not even hooked to the frame. The other one kind of is. I've got to grab some old bushings I've got. Some U-bolts for the rear end. I think the front is bolted in okay. And once I get that, I can get the spring pads mounted to the bottom of the leaf springs in the rear end, and it should be okay. So now the rear end is finally mounted in the car like it's supposed to be. I still need to do shocks, but now we can work on the brakes. It needs a master cylinder. The master cylinder is shot. I've got the brake lines off. I've got it full of fluid. Nothing's coming out, so not a big deal. I've got one for that. Hopefully the rest of the front brakes that are intact are going to work. Okay, so I'm starting on the rear brakes first because they're pretty much non-existent, and I got to get those on there. So we do have the main line going from the front of the car to the back, but we don't have any brakes on the actual hubs. We've got a brake shoe here, a little bit of hardware, no wheel cylinder. The other side has full brake shoes, wheel cylinder and everything, but I'm going to chunk all that, put all new drums, new brake shoes and hardware on the rear, new brake lines tied into the brake line that runs from the front to the back, and then we work on the front. Okay, so the drum brakes are done on both sides of the rear end. I've got new metal lines going across, and I've got a new rubber flex line going to my front and rear brake line. So now we can change the master cylinder out, put some fluid in there, bleed the brakes, and we'll see if the front brakes work. If they don't, I'll probably have to change hoses and wheel cylinders on them too, but I've already got the parts. Master cylinder is installed. Now this one has a bolt on top, which I do not like. I don't like that. I like the snap-on top better. Now we're going to put some fluid in it, bleed some brakes, and hopefully the front wheel cylinders or brake lines won't blow out. And this is what I found on the front brakes. So going to have to replace the hoses at least. Okay, got the brakes going. Had to put new hoses on both the front wheels. No big deal. Had to fix a leak in the back and then clean out the line that goes from the front all the way to the back. Now I went through about 2 quarts of brake fluid trying to get this thing to bleed right, but I finally did. So pedal feels okay. It's not great, but it's not terrible. Might bleed it again after it sits. Let some of that stuff settle out in it. Okay, so now we got to pull the drive shaft out. We're going to change the rear U-joint. All right, so to change the rear U-joint, I got to pull the drive shaft out so I can do it while I'm not up under the car, because that'd be a nightmare. If you're going to do that, you're going to lose a lot of transmission fluid unless you have one of these. This is a transmission plug kit. This is a brand new one. I've got another one that I've had for years. They work really well. You pull the drive shaft out, take the right size plug, stick it in where the yoke goes. You're not going to have fluid running all over the place. Also note, I've got the car leaning forward instead of jacking it up from the front. Now I already had it jacked up where I was doing the brakes, but this is also a good idea because all the transmission fluid, if it's, it gives it a better chance because it's leaning forward, less of it will run out the back. All right, so what you want to do is you want to get the plug that you think has the closest size to your yoke. This one could probably be either one of these. This one will fit a little looser. This one will fit a little tighter. So I've already got the back of my drive shaft out. Well, I didn't take it out. It was already like that. What we're going to do is yank the drive shaft out, take one of these plugs, stick it in there, keep all the fluid from coming out. I'll put a link to this kit in the description of the video. See if I can get this thing to slide out. It doesn't want to come out. All right, I think it's going to be this one. Now, since I've got it tilted forward, there's not a lot of fluid in there. I'm not getting any fluid loss. But now, there's no chance of it even if I let the car down. Alright, so we got the drive shaft in, we've got the brakes working, we got the rear end mounted right. Now it's time for a gas tank. So I just happen to have one laying around outside. It's not that bad, it's good enough. Now that the gas tank is in, I've got to get my rubber fuel lines in between the body line and the tank and the body line and the pump. Then I can stick a filter somewhere on this line, run the pump up to the carburetor, and we're ready to start on the wiring. Fuel system is done. Now it's time to get on the electrical so I can crank this thing up. And I'm going to trust that the fuel pump is going to work. If it doesn't, I've got a new one. I just didn't want to go through changing it. Done. Positive cable needs to be hooked up, and that's it. Now I do need to straighten up the ignition switch in the cab because it's a little bit of a mess. I've just got it laying there, so I'm going to strap it up. I did get an oil pressure gauge mounted, so we got that, but I'm going to do something with this ignition switch. Now a couple of things I'm putting a lot of faith in. The fuel pump that was there originally is still hooked up, and the water pump that was there originally, which is probably all rusted out on the inside. Now I've had pretty good luck with fuel pumps in the past, sitting this long, and they're pretty good. They sometimes they go bad, sometimes they don't. Water pump, kind of doubt it, but I'm not going to run it long, so hopefully it won't have any problems. I'm really not worried about the heater hoses being hooked up. I just didn't want to make a bypass. I didn't have any other hose. That was the easiest option as long as it doesn't leak. And I did run a brand new accelerator cable. I have one laying around. It's the one I took off Chevy Nova when it kept coming loose. Okay, so now what I need to do is get a fan belt tomorrow, put some fuel in it, hook the battery up, mount the ignition switch where it's not going to fall over and short against something or get tangled up in my legs. Put some fuel in it, see if we can get it running and driving. Okay, so this thing is almost ready to drive. I put some fuel in it. I pulled some wiring out of the engine compartment so that it would not catch on fire because it was laying all over the exhaust manifold. Now we have to jack the rear end up, crank it up, see if it's going to get fuel pressure and run because I'm not sure about the fuel pump. And then once we do that, we'll put it in gear, see if the tires will spin over, make sure the brakes work, then we'll go for a drive. All right, see if our ignition switch works. All right, that works. All right, let's see if it'll crank up. Put a little carburetor cleaner in the carburetor. Maybe it'll draw some fuel to the fuel pump that way. No fuel yet. Let me do it again. Fuel pump may not be working. All right, I changed the fuel pump, got a new one on there, got everything tightened up now. I dumped some fuel in the carburetor. Let's see if it'll crank up and prime the fuel pump. Yeah, looks like I got a splash of something in there. So just got to do that one more time and we might have some fuel coming up. Alright, I think we're running on fuel from the fuel pump now. Alright, so we got it running off a fuel pump. That's good. Got a few gallons of gas in the tank. I am worried that I don't have any exhaust pipes on this thing. It's just the manifold dumping straight down right here and straight back on that side. I'm kind of worried about some of the stuff under there catching fire, but fire extinguisher's right there. Anyway, alright, here's what we're going to do. We're going to crank it up, put it in gear. I've got it on jack stands, see if the back tires move. tires were moving. Now, I was looking at the driver's side tire, not the passenger side from the seat, and I didn't see it moving as much, so I kept moving it back and forth, reverse to drive, and this tire was going crazy. So it'll be fine. Now, that's not good to do that, but it's okay. I got to bleed the brakes again. They felt real mushy. So I'm going to bleed the brakes again real quick. We're going to drive this junk. Which one? I'm leaking oil like crazy out of the valve covers. So, I'm gonna give it some more timing. A little bit more timing, and we're gonna try it again. Definitely hot. All right, technically it did run and drive. Just not clickbait, it did run and drive. Just a little bit. It drove from here to the front of my yard, a couple of 300 feet, and it died. It died. So what happened was when I revved it up trying to do a burnout, it shut off, and now it won't crank, and it's only got 30 pounds of compression. Probably the timing gear on the cam has nylon teeth on it from the factory. Probably jumped time a little bit, and some of those teeth broke off, or were gnarled down enough. After sat for a long time, they dried out and got brittle. That's what I'm guessing. But not sure if I'm going to give up on this thing yet, or take all the parts and put a two-door together. I did a poll, and that's what some of you guys wanted, so that might be what I do. I might do a little bit more to try to make this thing cool first. I got a couple of ideas, and we'll see. But I do have parts for the budget Nova that finally came in, so we're back on that thing in the next video. We'll see you soon.